Someone asked Reb Chaim Brisker, how come he's so lenient? Whenever people ask him about if they're allowed to break their fast on Yom Kippur or Tisha B'Av, he always is very lenient. Someone asked him, why are you so lenient? He said, I'm not lenient about Yom Kippur, I'm not lenient about Tisha B'Av, I'm very stringent about the laws of guarding your life. So too, when we talk about things that we should say or shouldn't say, you can't say I'll be extra strict and I won't say it, or I'll be extra strict and I will say it, because in both situations you're dealing with lives. So what is really the correct approach? Before we get into that question, I just wanted to point out that the choice of fight or flight is actually a sucker's choice, because there aren't just two choices. It's not either I'm going to fight or I'm going to hold it in. There is a way to say things, and there's a way to express yourself and not get into a fight at the same time. And that's what I'd like to discuss tonight. This man was in Israel, and he went out to just moved there, and he went to get some oranges. Climbed into someone else's field, sees this beautiful orange tree, and he starts munching on the oranges. A policeman comes over. He can't believe his eyes. This guy is stealing oranges. He says, what's going on? How does no one ever taught you how to respect other people's property? You're stealing. What are you doing? What are you thinking? The guy is munching on the orange. This is so tasty. This is great. I love Israel. Not only do they have great oranges, you could get to hear a Dvar Torah, hear words of Torah while I'm eating the oranges. This week, we read about Moshe Rabbeinu before his passing. Last time he talked to Jewish people, and he begins talking to them by rebuking them. And he talks about events that have happened 20 and 30 and 40 years before. And the question is, why is he choosing to talk to them now about events that happened such a long time ago at the end of his life? People usually at the end of their life, they want to make peace with their children. And here Moshe Rabbeinu, instead of trying to make peace, he starts rebuking them specifically at the end of his life. They say about this guy who was a bit of a stingy person, that right before he passes away, he's on his deathbed, and he calls all his children to come, and they all come running. They think maybe Dad will finally give us something. Shmerel, are you here? Yes, Dad, I'm here by your side. Beryl, are you here? Dad, I'm by your side. Laser, I'm by your side, Dad. Chana, yes, Dad, I'm here with you too. If you're all here, then who's watching the store? So it's possible that Moshe Rabbeinu is telling them something at the end of his life, and it's harsh. And the question is, why would he choose to delay saying anything to them till then, and choose to say these harsh words only then? If we understand this, we'll understand a lot about how to share things with other people in a way that will be effective, and not only will they not send it back to us with some venom, but we'll be happy to accept our words and have a good effect on others. The Gemara says, Rabbi Tarfon says, that although the Torah says you should always rebuke your friend, Rabbi Tarfon says, I don't know if there's one person in our generation that is willing to accept rebuke. Although it says officially in the books, hey, it's a good thing, rebuke people, Rabbi Tarfon says, I don't know anybody like that. That's Rabbi Tarfon in his generation. Rabbi Tarfon says that if you see someone who has a little bit of they have a bone in their teeth, you say to them, oh, there's something in your teeth. So instead of them responding with, oh, thank you, the more likely response is, oh, do you think there's something in my teeth? Well, there's a log between your shoulders. There's a beam between your eyes. people don't generally like to be rebuked. They don't like to be told off. And what does the Torah mean, giving us this commandment to rebuke other people when it seems like that nobody likes to do this? Now, although the Rebbe Rashab says we should love criticism, criticism will place you on the true heights, but do you know anybody who likes criticism? I don't. People don't like criticism. And how can we possibly be successful at doing this mitzvah? Before we discuss that, I want to just share with you an amazing story about the Sfas Emes. Sfas Emes, he was a child, his father and mother both passed away. He was raised by his grandfather. One night, the young Sfas Emes, I think he was 10, 11 years old, he was studying with his study partner, and they had some difficult Gemara, and they stayed up all night trying to figure out this Gemara. And he goes to sleep at 6 o'clock in the morning. 6 o'clock in the morning he's going to sleep, and in Ger they begin davening at 7 o'clock in the morning. If you go to sleep at 6, it's hard to get up at 6:30. So he gets up at 7 and comes to shul at 7:30, and his grandfather, the Chiddushei Harim, is fuming. He says, "How dare you do this? This is the Yetzer Hara of laziness. This is where all your problems are coming from. You have to overcome this Yetzer Hara. Never, ever sleep in again." Now his study partner is looking at him like, he's thinking to himself, why doesn't he respond to his grandfather and tell his grandfather what's really going on? That Zayde, we were up all night studying. You want to know why he woke up late? Because he was up all night. But doesn't say anything. So his study partner said to him, "Hey, how come you didn't respond to your grandfather and tell him the truth?" So the Sfas Emes, this child, answered him like this. In last week's parsha, we read about how the tribes of Gad and Reuven asked Moshe Rabbeinu for permission to have the land across the Jordan instead of going into Israel. And Moshe Rabbeinu begins to rebuke them like no other place in the Torah. 10 verses after another. He says, "You guys are so wicked. You don't want to fight with your brothers. Your brother's going to go to Israel. They're going to fight. You're going to stay over here with your families. Are you crazy? You got to fight with everybody else." And the children of Gad and Reuven, after Moshe finishes, they said, that's what you meant. We want to join them and fight with them and win the wars, and afterwards we'll return. And the question is, how come they didn't stop Moshe Rabbeinu in mid-sentence? "Hey, Moshe, that's what we meant." How come they just let Moshe go on and on? So Sfas Emes told his friend the reason they did is because when Moshe is talking to you, you have a merit to hear rebuke from a tzaddik, and that's how he felt about his grandfather. But that's a very, very rare thing. So when do we rebuke, when don't we, and how do we do it? So let's first figure out how this works according to halacha. Torah says that you shall not hate your brother in your heart. You shall rebuke your brother. So the Torah is telling us that the first thing is, in order for your rebuke to work, you got to care. And you're obligated to care. You're not allowed to just say, well, I'll let them live their lives. You got to care and you got to share. You're not allowed to keep it in your heart. That's one verse. You're not allowed to hold things in. You have something to say. You got to say it. It's a mitzvah to say it. But there's another mitzvah which is the opposite. The other mitzvah is, the Talmud says, just like it's a mitzvah to say something that will be heard, so too there is an obligation not to say something that will not be heard. It's a mitzvah to say something that's going to be heard, and it's a mitzvah not to say something that will not be heard. So what do? You have this mitzvah, you have to share if you can. You have another mitzvah, don't say it if it won't be heard. It's a famous story, they say it about many tzaddikim, about the third vision of the Rebbe, that he once went to go visit this wealthy man in his town, and this guy never visited this guy before, and the wealthy man is so excited to see the visions of the Rebbe come to his house, and he offers him a cup of tea, and they sit down. And after he's sitting there for 5-6 minutes, he's quiet, he gets up and he says, "Okay, thank you very much," and he begins to leave. So the guy's like, "Why'd you visit me? It's a great honor you visited me, but what was your intent in coming here?" So the Vision Rebbe says, "There's this rare mitzvah that I wanted to do." "Rare mitzvah? What'd you want to do?" well, there's a mitzvah to say something when it's going to be heard, and a mitzvah not to say something when it won't be heard, and I know you're not going to listen to me, so I wanted to have this, to fulfill this rare mitzvah and not tell you what I know for sure you won't listen to. You got the guy's attention. So the guy says, try me. So the Vizhnitzer Rebbe says, no, I have this mitzvah, I don't want to lose it, please. If I sit at home, I can't do this mitzvah. I came here specially so that I could share this with you and not share this with you and thus fulfill the mitzvah. Mike, rebuke means to chastise someone, to tell them to act better. But we'll get to that soon, how that works. So the Vizhnitzer Rebbe tells the guy, I can't tell you what it is because I'll lose the mitzvah. The guy says, I promise you, I will do whatever I can to fulfill what you're asking me to do. Just say it. So the Vizhnitzer Rebbe says, well, there's this widow, she owes money to the bank, and the bank is going to take away her home. And it's in your bank, so I wanted to ask you for the bank to forgive the loan. The man's like, it's not my loan, it's the bank's loan. I can't forgive the bank's loan. So the Vizhnitzer says, you see, I tried to do this mitzvah and the man got the hint, and he paid off the whole entire loan with his own money. But the point is, there is a mitzvah not to say something when it's not going to be heard, and on the other hand, we have a mitzvah to say something, so what do? So the Meiri, he writes that you have to think it through. You have to make an estimation. Are your words going to be heard or not? Think about the person you're speaking to, think about your relationship with them, and think about if you have a good chance of being successful. That's what Meiri says. The Sefer HaChinuch says, have a little more faith in that. Don't write off people just because your logic says that they won't listen. Have faith, God will help you. I think that when the stakes are higher, when we're talking about a situation, let's say, where there's a couple, let's say, on the brink of divorce, I think in that situation, you need to gravitate towards the opinion of the Sefer HaChinuch and not sit with your hands folded. You got to try and help out when people are in danger. And you might gravitate to the other opinion when the stakes aren't that high. You're walking on Beverly Drive and somebody is jogging and they want to tie their shoe, and the Torah says you're supposed to tie the left shoe before the right shoe. Chances are that your opinion about how they're going to tie their shoes isn't the right thing to say at that time. When you're helping your little children get dressed, you could tell them what the Torah says about tying your shoe, but probably that's not the right thing to tell that guy jogging. So that's the Meiri says, that's what Sefer HaChinuch says, figure out the situation. It's interesting that the Sefer HaChinuch also draws our attention to Avraham. He says Avraham ended up hating his son because he never rebuked his son, and his son went off to a bad direction, Yishmael, and Avraham had to throw him out of the house. But he says, don't keep things in your heart. If you have an issue, you need to express it. You're not all keep things repressed, because the end is you're gonna explode. So although you have to express it, you have to know when to express it and how to express it. So what's the key over here? So let's learn about Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu waits 40 years to tell people about different things that they've done. And he actually is talking to the generation that didn't make these mistakes. He's talking to the generation after the generation that had committed the mistakes that he's talking about. So Moshe Rabbeinu, talking to this generation, waits 40 years, and he finally tells them what's on his mind. Why did he tell them now? We're now in the time of the 9 days, and we just celebrated the yard site of Aaron HaKohen. And Aaron HaKohen is the only one that Torah says the day they passed away, in the first day of Av. Aaron HaKohen, it says about him that he loved creatures and he brought them close to Torah. Those words are very deep. First step is, he loved people. Moshe Rabbeinu waited until he was able to convince the people that he loved them. Until he had that relationship with them, until he was able to be certain that they knew he loved them, he didn't rebuke them. He took them out of Egypt, and he brought them to the desert, and he waited until he vanquished all of the different obstacles on the way to get to Israel, until they're finally there by the border, and he had helped them out physically and spiritually and led them all this way, and now he knew that he had their attention. He knew that they would be able to listen to him. So similarly, the first thing is that the person you're speaking to has to know that you mean their best, and not only that, but they have to be able to demonstrate that by their experience, by seeing you've actually been there for them, in a way that they understand, that not just you understand that you've done stuff for them, but they, on their perspective, Moshe Rabbeinu knew the whole time that he was there for them, but he waited until the Jewish people sensed, and he knew that they sensed that he loved them. That's what he waited for. He waited for a moment where he knew that they felt that they were cared for. The Baal Shem Tov says something similar. He says, don't try to help someone out spiritually only, help them out physically too. After you help someone out physically, it's much easier to try to help them spiritually. Help them out with finding a job. Help them out physically. And then you can also talk to them about mitzvahs, but trying to do the second first isn't as effective until you've actually proven that you're dedicated to that person and you care about them. But that's only step one. And there's a second thing. We went from Moshe Rabbeinu. Second thing is, Moshe Rabbeinu speaks to Jewish people with first praising them. It's amazing. Every book of the Torah begins with a praise of the Jewish people. The book of Genesis begins with the word Bereshis, and the Talmud says, this teaches us the Jewish people are called the first and the highest. The book of Exodus begins with counting the Jewish people, and the Talmud says we are counted because God loves us. He counts us. Each one of us count. The book of Leviticus begins with God calling Moses, and the Talmud says God called Moses with love. The book of Numbers also begins with God counting the Jewish people, again emphasizing love, and the book of Devarim, of Deuteronomy, also begins this week with the Torah honoring the Jewish people and not mentioning their faults explicitly. Some people, when they want to rebuke someone, they take the knife, they stick it in, and they turn it a couple of times. They feel they have to say it all the way. Moshe Rabbeinu does not do that. Moshe Rabbeinu just hints to the issues. The last time the Rebbe spoke, the Rebbe said that there's a difference between the way you relate to others and the way that you work on yourself. When you work on yourself, there's two areas. Area number one, improve the good, do good. Area number two, the second area is turn away from evil. In regards to someone else, there's only one area. The area is help them become better. Don't worry about the negative. Unless you have a relationship like a father to a son, don't work on the negative. Try to bring in positive. That's the last time I ever spoke, I've mentioned that. But even when you're trying to bring in positive, even when you're trying to influence someone to become better, if it's criticism, people don't want to hear it. So the first thing is, the person has to know and you have to and feel that you care and you're there and you're involved. This guy was out of work for a long time. He comes to shul, and he's out of work for a long time. He's depressed. He's shmettert. He sits in shul. The chazin's up to kedusha. The whole shul stands up and they answer kedusha as is customary. Up to kedusha, kadosh, kadosh, kadosh. The whole shul, the men, the women, the children, everybody stands up. This guy, he doesn't know what's going on, so he is just sitting there, and he's depressed, and he doesn't stand up. Everyone's like, no, the whole shul's, no, stand up, and he's just sitting there. And finally he stands up and he says to himself, when I'm home for a month without work, everybody's quiet. I'm sitting in the shul, everyone says stand up. How come no one noticed when I was home without work? So there has to be a feeling on the recipient's part that the guy that who's talking to him cares about them. But that's only one element. The second element is it's you lift the person up. There was this rabbi in the early 1940s, 1930s, when the previous Rebbe visited America. This rabbi asked the previous Rebbe the following question. He says, I encourage people in my shul to keep various mitzvahs, to keep Shabbos, to keep kosher, and I'm going to lose my job. No one likes to hear this kind of stuff. What should I do? So the previous Rebbe said to him that in a sauna, people react differently than on the street. If someone hits you with eucalyptus leaves on your back, you're walking the street, you're like, what does this guy want? And you call the police. But if you go in the sauna, you go up a step and up another step, and you warm up, then it feels good. So the previous Rebbe said, before you administer your words that you think are inspiring and encouraging to people to make another step in their Judaism, warm them up first. Don't just pour on them, lift them up, warm them up, and then they'll be more receptive. That's what Moshe Rabbeinu does. First he pours the praise on. He says to the Jewish people, you guys are awesome. It's unbelievable. The Rebbe points out that it doesn't connect it to the American phrase, but this is the source in the Torah for the popular American phrase. The phrase is, every bit of criticism has to be sandwiched between two layers of praise. The Rebbe says that's what we see in the Torah. The Torah begins with praise, and only then does it give the criticism. Only then does the Torah say how we have to change and better ourselves. So the first thing is, got to lift the person up and tell them how special they are, and warm them up, and only then can you begin to broach the subject of something that you feel needs to improve. Another important point, besides the timing, besides the words that you're saying being said in a way that's uplifting, say a chapter of Psalms before you begin. Ask God for help. In order that when words come from the heart, words enter the heart, but you need God to help you that the words should actually come from the heart. As the Rebbe said, that if you see the person not receiving those words from you, that means that not really sincere. So say a chapter of Psalms first, before you begin to administer any kind of review. So number one, again, to briefly recap. Number one is wait for the moment. Wait for the moment that there's a relationship that's built there, and the person wants to hear. Number two is when you speak with encouraging words. Lift the person up. Put them into the sauna. And number three is don't say words that have to do with the negative. Only speak about increasing, adding more positivity. And number four, pray to God. But the bottom line is that the Talmud says that you shouldn't give up after the first time. The Talmud says, "Torchiach," keep on going, speak words from the heart, and eventually God will help you get through. And you need to express your feelings, and you need to talk. But you also need to know that don't take the sucker's choice. It's not fight or flight. There is a way to say things at the right time, and be patient. As Moshe Rabbeinu was, actually, Moshe learned from God. God didn't give us the Torah when we were in Egypt. He didn't say, oh, you guys are in Egypt, here I have these rules for you. He first took us out of Egypt, took care of us, and gave us the manna from heaven, and gave us the water. And then he said, all right, I have something to tell you. So that's the way we need to react to people in our life that we want to see more of. We want to see their best come out of them. And lastly, I just want to point out one last final point. That is, you're seeing the goodness in the other person, believing in their inherent goodness in your eyes is the most powerful tool you have in anything. The fact that you see the good in the other person, the fact that you believe in their goodness, it will bring out their goodness, and will make them the most recipient to what you have to say. And that's what I wanted to share tonight. Have a wonderful Shabbos. I want to dedicate our shir tonight to Machol Machluf Ben Miriam for a complete and speedy recovery. Good Shabbos.